As a famous cybernetic man once said, feelings, I do not understand that word. Welcome back to another Doctor Who Series 12 episode review. In today's review, I'm of course going to be taking a look at part 1 to the Doctor Who Series 12 series finale, being Ascension of the Cybermen, as written by the series head writer, being Chris Chibnall. Now this episode, and the remaining episode of this series, does in fact have quite a lot riding on it, because the Doctor Who social media team, along with the actual show itself and its narrative, has been hyping up to this series finale and beyond in order to provide a little bit of exposure over the current plot arc that we have with this series. As per usual, I went into this episode, in fact, rather excited. It's a little bit different to usual. I normally go into an episode feeling nothing whatsoever. However, I was rather excited to see the Cybermen returning, especially given that we were going to see a brand new design. And of course, more importantly, within the previous review, I did of course take a look at the haunting of Villa Diodati, or whatever that episode was called, where we kind of had the foundations of this story being introduced, and naturally we're going to see more of that within this story and the remaining episode within the season. So since we have a lot to talk about, let's get on with this episode immediately and start talking and theorising about the plot arc of this series. Of course, we kind of have a very unusual technique within this story, where we have two plots going on at the same time, which at the current time of thinking, I can't really remember many Doctor Who stories that have done that in the past. We normally have a few scenes, of course, naturally hopping from location to location, which is what you've come to expect with a TV drama. However, with this story, we have a strikingly different style, where we literally have two completely different stories going on at the same time, which is rather experimental. We have the Cyber War stuff going on with the 13th Doctor, and we have this Brendan stuff going on with, of course, the Irish historical 1930s, 1940s setting, which is very unusual. Of course, the 13th Doctor stuff with the Cyber War, the more traditional aspect of this story, of course, seeing the lone Cyberman track down the remaining humans, or of course on a random battle-torn planet, and we had the remaining Cybermen, of course, being alongside the lone Cyberman and trying to track them down and eventually convert them into Cybermen. Now we have this lovely opening scene, of course, with the lone Cyberman having a little bit of a monologue zooming into the Cyberman's eye, a rather unusual design choice, and it almost stated that the Cybermen have died out, which is something very much that Captain Jack did also say within Fugitive of the Judoon. It's very odd to think that Captain Jack was in this series, and yet we've kind of almost forgotten about it by this point. And we have a very unusual quote from him saying that the Cybermen are over, which is something that I have failed to understand, which perhaps somebody could shed some light on this. I don't understand how the Cyber Empire is nearing its end, and yet there is a massive freighter of warrior Cybermen in neat condition. This rather large ship, not really doing anything, they're just in storage, and the lone Cyberman needs to go and track them down and essentially turn them back on so they can go wander about the universe, which the Empire, from what I understand, is not dead. It's been left on the cybernetic equivalent of being placed on standby, which I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I've missed something when watching this story, but that is what I didn't really understand. Wouldn't it have just been easier for the lone Cyberman to go and get the other Cybermen and switch them all back on, and then you have loads of Cybermen to go and track down the last few humans, as opposed to the lone Cyberman and two rather knackered-looking cyber-style Cybermen? I don't know, as I say, I might be missing something, but I just found that a little bit odd. I absolutely loved the opening scene where we had these cyber drones, of course, coming along, and we had the rather unusual, almost Warzone-style drone footage, which was quite cool. It definitely generated a lot of impact, and I like the fact that we've seen a few casualties. It also gave the companions something to do, and a few brilliant performances from Jodie. I absolutely loved her turning around to the different companions and screaming "I know" at the top of her voice. It sounded serious, and it definitely generated an aspect of threat for this story, and it generally carried out throughout the rest of the episode as well. This is the first story in a very long time with Doctor Who where I actually felt tension. I was kind of worried for the companions, which, especially given this TARDIS team, does say quite a lot. So yeah, the 13th Doctor had a few decent moments, and likewise that can be said for a few of the companions as well. Graham was his usual self, being all happy. However, even he was kind of worried by the situation, and I liked the way that both him and Yaz worked together on that rather derelict looking spaceship in order to get into the massive cyber ship. Well, it was a little bit too convenient, I suppose. However, it kind of moved the narrative forward. And Yaz as well. Yaz was given things to do. She had the main responsibility to make these people believe that they had a chance of survival, and she definitely did that. However, there was one quote that stuck out to me that said something like, "You've came far, Graham O'Brien," which that immediately shone red flags to me, saying, "You're going to be dead in the next episode or two," because it's generated sympathy for him. It feels like he's almost gone a little bit full circle by this point. However, perhaps a little bit too full circle too quickly. I think we could have seen a lot more with Graham, especially relating to his cancer that was previously mentioned within Can You Hear Me? And I think that generally he has a lot more to contribute to the series. Yaz as well, I feel like we're only just getting to know her character, especially once again after Can You Hear Me and that backstory with her, and I feel like if she was given that plot line a little bit earlier on, I would have been a bit more attached to her more quickly. But I think one thing that Series 12 has done is improve Yaz greatly, along with Graham O'Brien as well. It's continued to develop him. Then we have Ryan Sinclair, which I want to like Ryan, I really do, but they're not really doing anything with him. Of course he is left behind, which is fine, and he gets some time with the 13th Doctor, which is good. At the opening start of the story, I thought this is the opportunity to see him do something, and once again they didn't really do much. I like his relationship with the Doctor, and once again I don't mind Ryan as a character. He's just a bit two-dimensional. He doesn't have much going for him. Once again, be nice to see more. Arguably maybe even reduce the scenes with Graham and switch that for a few scenes of Ryan just to make him look a little bit more like an actual personality. Perhaps maybe the scene, I think I'm recalling back to a moment within Series 11, I'm pretty sure he mentioned something about being a mechanic or working in a garage. That might be just me creating development for him, I don't know. But either way, it would have been nice if he maybe had some skills relating to that, so then he could have like helped out with the coding of the cyber ship, being able to control it or something, anything. I just want some more development, which once again I'm placing my vast majority of bets on him dying by the end of next episode, if not the episode after that, because it's pointing that way, and I think it will happen. Probably Ryan and Graham, but then again I think all of them have had ample opportunity that could be leading to their deaths within the next story, and I wouldn't be shocked really if it was any of them. And now talking about the Irish stuff with Brendan, because Brendan is an unusual character and has generated quite a few theories. He kind of reminds me of Ruth from Fugitive of the Judoon, however without the big revelation at the end. We are still yet to see that revelation. Of course, originally a few people were thinking, is he the lone Cyberman? Which would make sense, especially given that a few of the scenes that the lone Cyberman was talking, it instantly then jumped to the scenes with Brendan, kind of indicating that that is him in the past maybe. Although there is also a few ideas going around that he could be another one of the Timeless Children, because that is apparently what the next episode is called. Maybe he could be a part of the CIA, the Celestial Intervention Agency, and the mind-wiping stuff at the very end of that is the memory seeping through from his time within the agency that has kind of been disguised as a metaphor of a pre-existing past within Ireland that never in fact existed, and the entirety of it is basically a vision, which I suppose would make sense once more. Of course, one of the things that a few people have mentioned is his dad and the police officer, of course not growing up and not aging, I suppose, with Brendan, which to start with struck me as odd, because we have this scene at the very beginning where both the police officer and the dad seem to act in complete shock that they've found this child, which to me, especially when you add the birth certificate scene at the very beginning, that would indicate that they didn't have an idea of this is their job to kind of almost teach him to be an agent or teach him up to a certain aim that he isn't aware of. And it would kind of indicate that they are just as in the dark as he is. And then we have the scene at the end where they do of course turn, so maybe perhaps it was dormant within them, very much like of course once again the fake husband of Ruth within Fugitive of the Judoon. Are they the equivalent of that for him? Who knows? I do know however that Philip Hawkins did do a brilliant video theorising on it, which I may leave in a description below link, which I'll probably forget. If not, type in Philip Hawkins, he's a great YouTube channel and he's lovely, and yeah, just check out his videos, he's really good. But he did do a good video relating to the theories and the possibilities of what might be going on with him. Of course, we do also have the man, I can't remember what his name is, Kashamus, I think I've wrote in my notes, which I am now dyslexic, by the way. That is a new thing that is just related to me personally, so yeah, Big words and Doctor Who don't mix well, apparently. I've always knew that, but now I know why. But yeah, Kashamus, he's of course the name of the person as opposed to the planet. I'm getting once again flags around him that he is more than he is letting on. I did note that he had a medallion in the story. I believe that might be a, whatever it's called for what you think, Chameleon Arch, the disguise. I believe it might be one of them, and he might either be another incarnation of the Doctor relating to the Ruth timeline, or just another Time Lord entirely, because he did of course acknowledge Gallifrey at the very end, but a Time Lord with actual importance as opposed to another Time Lord. Let's just say if it is a random Time Lord, I will be a little bit disappointed. I thought the whole idea with the portal was interesting. I kind of seen where it was going very, very early on. Of course, you have the Sacha Dhawan Master coming back as well, which I expected. I knew he was going to be in the final. You could just sense it. It was leading up to that. His costume was fun, although I can't really comment on him because I think he said one line and that was it. But yeah, I look forward to seeing more of him within the next story. But yeah, relating back to the Cyberman theme, because I kind of feel that is the main focus of this story, and the next episode is going to focus on Gallifrey more, and maybe the Cybermen might take a sub-role, kind of, similar to that of the Brendan plotline, who knows. But I think that the Cybermen stuff was fun. Of course, the new design, it looks creepy. It is a nice mix between the Nightmare and Silver Cybermen and the classic series Cybermen. Somebody did point out on Twitter that the two Cybermen perhaps were place fillers for an original classic series Earthshock style Cyberman, maybe, to indicate that of the Cyber War, which would have been nice, although I suppose the Cybers ones look just as nice. But yeah, I think the whole idea of the Cyber War, I think what I liked about it is it gave the Cybermen more personality, in that they are of course emotionless, however it gave them something to do. However, this story, I feel, once more, and a very similar theme to the rest of the new series Doctor Who, is that they are just soldiers. They aren't doing anything that is reminding me of Cybermen. It would have been nice to see them get one of the people from the planet in the early half of this story and convert them, or attempt to convert them, and it goes wrong. Maybe do a Cyberwoman style thing from, of course, Torchwood. That would have been nice. I think it would have been effective to have a conversion scene within this story, or maybe multiple, because I honestly thought that was where this story was going. However, we didn't see that, and that would have reminded the audience about why the Cybermen are so effective, because instead they were just reduced once more to that soldier role, which is annoying. I think that what strikes me about this plot is that it has the opportunity to be the equivalent of a Big Finish box set like Dark Eyes and Ravenous, where it has an extremely long duration, however maybe adventures do take place in between it. So it would be quite cool if this is just the origin for a whole plot that is going to span for quite a lot of adventures, and we maybe follow the Cyber War and the Lone Cyberman whilst other episodes are going on at the same time. However, I feel like the current position that Doctor Who is in, it's not really able to do that. It's very unusual. I do think though, however, that the next episode has a little bit too much riding on it, and that is something that I've mentioned since the very start of this plot arc in Spyfall, where we need to be very, very careful with the climax of new series plot arcs, because there hasn't really been many that have actually felt like a justified ending, especially quite a lot of the Stephen Moffat plot arcs. They kind of feel rushed, such as Hellbent as an example. I think possibly one of his best executed plot arcs will probably be Series 5, because that felt rather self-contained, and it felt like it did of course connect together with of course a few threads here and there that did then link into the silence with Series 6, which to me was where it all went wrong and everything turned into a massive mess. And because of that, I as a fan have lost confidence within plot arcs and series finales, and I want to be proven wrong. Don't get me wrong, I am not saying that the final is going to be rubbish. I just am concerned that it is going to be rubbish. I want the series finale to be brilliant. However, so far, and given the past reputation of current new series Doctor Who, it's going to be quite a change if it does actually turn into a decent finale with a justified ending, because we have a lot on the next episode. We have Cybermen. I want to see a decent amount of the new design. I want a continuation of the Cyber War plot that actually follows on from this story. We have Gallifrey coming back. I want to see more of Gallifrey in an effective manner, which is something that I think I will be fair in saying we have not seen throughout the entirety of new series Doctor Who, because every time it comes back it feels like a writer is scared to actually write it. It's almost like we don't want Gallifrey. It's like every single time it comes along, the writers are hyping Gallifrey, and then as soon as they actually get to it, they're like, crap, we're here now, quickly scurry off. And that was pretty much the summary of Hellbent, and even maybe Dave the Doctor, arguably to some extent as well. It kind of feels like there is so much riding on things such as Gallifrey, especially when introducing the Timeless Child aspect, which has the possibilities of intertwining the origins of Gallifrey society, including of course Rassilon, Omega, the Other, and all of those other things. A few people have even mentioned looms on Twitter, which, if we are venturing into the area of looms in Doctor Who canon, that is once more treading on rather fine territory, which is something that I certainly don't expect from a showrunner that in the previous series said that he wants it to be a new beginning for new fans that have never seen the show whatsoever. It's certainly a very drastic change from that of Doctor Who Series 11. But overall for this story, relating back to Ascension of the Cybermen, which is the main point of this review, because it feels like, in a way, when you're talking about Ascension of the Cybermen, the whole point of this story is theorising on what may happen next, and it just worries me, because this episode does have a lot going for it. However, very much like some of the other episodes within this series, such as Fugitive of the Judoon, if the climax isn't very good, then it kind of makes this story not as good as well, because you know that climax that is coming. It's almost a bit like the end of Face the Raven. I feel like Chris Chibnall may have perhaps been inspired by some of the other writers from this series as to how he approaches the 13th Doctor, because I think that Jodie Whittaker's performances really do stand out when you have that darker, more serious dialogue, the likes of which that she has performed in other dramas such as Broadchurch and even that episode of Black Mirror that she appeared in. She can do dark and gritty quite well, which is quite baffling considering that her Doctor throughout the majority of Series 11 was depicted as this rather over-bubbly, happy character, almost like a clown. And I think that these episodes have really shown that Jodie excels when she is given a story that has a lot of threat riding behind it. I think especially the scene within the spacecraft where we have the lone Cyberman on the monitor and she is talking to him within the projection, and we have that moment of her talking about his flaws as a character, the fact that he loathes his own creation, and then the lone Cyberman turns around and says, yes, you are correct, or something like that. And then Jodie just says the one quirky line of, oh, I may need to charge you for therapy or something like that. That was funny. I like that. It was a nice delivery of comedy, but also at the same time, it wasn't over-exaggerated comedy. It didn't take you out of the moment, which is something that could be said for the 11th and 12th Doctors, where the comedy used to almost drive the plot, and it was almost channeling to when the next laugh would be to keep the scene going. This was just a nice brief moment to add a light-hearted element. However, it didn't take away from the seriousness overall of the story, which is certainly what I like this episode for the most. It felt dark, and it felt like it had the tension and threat, and more importantly, the Cybermen did feel like a worthy opponent for the Doctor, arguably more so than the reconnaissance Dalek within Resolution. Although that was a rather alrightly written story, it was an interesting take on the Daleks, and it did experimental stuff. When we actually had the Dalek put together, in some scenes it didn't really feel once more like a threat for the Doctor to go up against, but in this story, especially when you have the segregation of the companions, you have the Doctor off in one place with Ryan, and when you have that moment of her trying to contact Diaz and the Cybermen are closing in, that seemed to genuinely feel quite helpless, and the Doctor was giving rather empty advice like, oh, escape, how is she going to do that? But it helped because it made the scene feel desperate, like considering that these Cybermen are of course closing in. Once more, that will be continued in the next story. I thought that the Brendan storyline was disjointed, but that was the idea of it. And of course the whole purpose of these scenes is to generate further information for the main plot arc, but I acted as a really nice way to jump away from the cyber stuff, because especially given the way that it was going, it would have been a lot of booms, a lot of explosions, and generally a lot of running from corridor to corridor that would have got quite old quite quickly. But having that division in there and the element of mystery kind of always kept your brain ticking over, which is very good and once again an effective way to write a story. And not gonna lie, I'm impressed in Chris Chibnall's work for this episode, and it is a vast improvement on some of the previous stories that he has done within Series 11. The Saranga Conundrum, for one. And that brings to an end another Doctor Who Series 12 episode review. To end off this review, of course, taking a look at the Doctor Who Series 12 ranking, I've came prepared this time round and I've put the episode in already. So Ascension of the Cybermen does in fact take 4th place on the ranking, so it has been increased above the vast majority of episodes from this series. So of course it does currently stand at number 1, Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror, number 2 is Spyfall Part 2, number 3 is Fugitive of the Jadoon, number 4 is Ascension of the Cybermen, number 5 is Spyfall Part 1, number 6 is Can You Hear Me, number 7 is The Haunting of Villa Diodati, number 8 is, of course, Orphan 55, and number 9 is Praxeus. Where will the 10th and final episode of this series go? Tune in next week to find out, I suppose. But to end off this review, because this video will be going up before the series finale airs, ending off on a few things I don't want the next episode to do, so I can kind of refer back to it within the next review in case it is a bad series finale, and then I can say, well, I've said it before the episode even aired, and this is why, because it didn't really live up to my expectations. I want Gallifrey to actually be used in a decent manner. I want a little bit of Gallifreyan history used. It would be nice to maybe have some Gallifreyan Celestial Intervention Agency stuff brought in. I want some decent exposure of these new variations of Cybermen. More importantly, I actually want to hear them talk. I also want some Cybermen conversion scenes to actually give them a bit more threat and remind us of what the Cybermen actually are, as opposed to being soulless soldiers with no expression at all, because they are much more than that. I also am expecting a companion death, or maybe even more. Don't really mind whom, don't really want it to be Graham, but I feel like it might be. I want some really good scenes between Jodie and the Master, which, judging by the trailer, we might possibly get that. And if we were living in an ideal world, this is the best opportunity to bring back Captain Jack Harkness, which is the main thing, because otherwise it makes the cameo a few episodes ago absolutely useless. It's just a cheap piece of fan service essentially, and doesn't make sense. So this is the episode that Captain Jack should come back in to give that use in the previous episode some relevance. However, I don't think it's going to happen. It would be nice to have some surprises in there. Could the old man, the hobbit guy, the Kasoma, or whatever he's called, Kasomas, I have an odd feeling that he could be another incarnation of the Doctor from the Roof timeline, because I feel like she is the Doctor, however, from an alternative universe or from an alternative timeline, even though Chris Chibnall's kind of said against that. But yeah, who knows? I just want a decent story. I suppose tune in next week to find out if I'm like this or like this. Yeah, what do you think of this story? Why not leave in the comments section below your theories and general reactions of what you thought of the episode itself. I do of course stay tuned on The Host Productions for brand new Doctor Who content each and every week, from product reviews, book reviews, audio drama reviews, and every single other thing that I do of course do. So thanks for watching, I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.